Okay, so from today onwards, actually, we are going to start with our third unit, which is the electrical and thermal conduction. Um, in this, actually, this will be one. There will be one lecture today on this topic, and then after that, Varun will take next class on Monday because I will not be able to take the class on Monday. That's why we decided to start this topic today, so that Varun can take the class on Monday. I will be going for the JE exam duty, so that's why I will not be available on Monday. But from Tuesday onwards, continuously there will be the class will be we will start covering this topic after today's class. So in this in the third unit, it is actually chapter two of the book, and we will be discussing electrical and thermal conduction in solid. First few lectures will be from chapter two, and then chapter four of the book will also be covered in this unit only, which is electrical and thermal conduction in solid. Brief overview of the chapter is like we will start with some classical models for electrical conduction and as well as thermal conduction. We will discuss how classically using the Newtonian mechanics we can explain some of the things with respect to electrical and thermal conduction. And then later on we will move to a little bit of quantum mechanics, like what are the quantum mechanical models for electrical conduction and how they are different from classical models of electrical conduction. So that will be our larger picture of this unit. So now let us start with the first thing, with the first subtopic of this chapter, which is kinetic molecular theory. As you might have heard before, we use this kinetic molecular theory for describing a lot of diverse topics such as pressure of a gas, heat capacity of metals, average speed of electrons in semiconductors, and electrical noise. Originally, it was developed only for the gas molecules, which are very far away and dispersed in a large medium. Right, the density of a gas is very low. Later on, some scientists basically they decided to apply this classical theory on solids also, and they observed that some of the phenomena which are observed in solids like heat capacity of metals and average speed of electrons in semiconductors, electrical noise are some of the things which can also be explained using the same kinetic molecular theory which is applicable for the gases. So we will start with this kinetic molecular theory. So these are some of the basic assumptions before we actually start talking about any model. First, we need to see what are the basic assumptions which are involved in that particular model, right? And those models define these assumptions define the model also because they are part of the model itself. So let us go one by one. What are the assumptions which we take in kinetic molecular theory? First is molecules are in constant random motion. That is, the center of mass of the gas is at rest. Right. So if all the molecules are in constant random motion, random is the keyword here. Then center of the mass can be safely assumed to be at rest, right? Because at any time all the velocities will cancel each other. So center of mass will not move from its position. That is our first assumption. Second is intermolecular forces are negligible and volume which is occupied by the gas molecules is much smaller than the volume of the gas, which basically means that the number of molecules are much smaller in comparison to the total volume in which the gas is uh, filled, basically, right? So I mean, the volume which is available for the molecules to travel around, that is much larger than the volume of the molecules itself, which also means that the molecules will be very far away from each other. They will not be in close proximity to each other, right? That's why we are. This is the first part that says intermolecular forces are negligible. Okay. Then third assumption is the time between two collisions, because since there are molecules which are moving in random motion, then there will be collisions also between the molecules, right? So the time interval between the collisions is much smaller than the time of free motion, which which means actually that after after a collision it takes long time for the next collision to happen, right? Time interval of collision is much smaller than time interval of free motion. So most of the time actually the molecules are in free motion. Fourth is molecules move with uniform velocity between collisions and there is no external force. Molecules move with uniform velocity and there is no external force. If there is no external force, of course, the molecules move with uniform velocity, because if you want to change velocity, you need acceleration or the force. If there is no force, they will be moving with uniform velocity. This is actually an extension of this second point, right? Intermolecular forces are negligible. This also includes any external force also. We are assuming that in addition to intermolecular forces, negligible intermolecular forces, there is no external force also. So that's why molecules will be moving in a uniform velocity. All the collisions are perfectly elastic, which means there is no momentum loss, right? In perfectly elastic collision, the magnitude of the just a second, yeah, the momentum is total energy is conserved as well as velocity is change the direction, but it does not change the magnitude, right? So that is also, that is the fifth assumption, that all the collisions are perfectly elastic. Collisions with the, like, within the in between the molecules as well as with the wall of the container in which the gas is kept, all the collisions are perfectly elastic. And sixth is Newtonian mechanics is applicable. We basically started with this classical assumption that Newtonian mechanics is applicable, which means force will be is equal to d by dt of momentum, or rate of change of momentum is force, right? We know that. So Newtonian mechanics is applicable. So these are six assumptions. You need to have a very good idea about this, what we have discussed so far, because later on we will see some of these assumptions put the restriction or the constraint on this model to be applicable for the solids, right? But we are starting with these basic assumptions. So now let us start with the derivation of this kinetic molecular theory, right? So let us say this is my container. Okay, there are gas atoms which are filled in this container, and all the sides, this is a cubic container, so all the sides of the container are equal and their length is a, right? Now, as we said, right, the molecules are moving randomly, they can move in any direction, right? So that's what is shown with these arrows here. All the molecules, they are all moving in a random motion. So what will happen is, one of the molecules which will be having a velocity towards this wall, it will come and hit this wall, right? After hitting the wall, it will go back. As we said earlier, all the collisions are perfectly elastic. So only the velocity, the direction of the velocity will change, but its magnitude will remain the same, right? So let us say this molecule comes and hits the wall here, and then it for the next collision to happen, it will have to move first in this direction and then come back to this wall, right? Then only there will be the next collision. So total change in momentum, if we are taking the momentum in the x direction between two collisions, the total change in momentum is 2m vx, right? Because velocity is changing from plus vx to minus vx, right? So that means total change in the momentum is 2 times mv, or mvx actually, because we are taking only the x direction. Now once we know the change in momentum, rate of change of momentum is force, right? Force is equal to delta p by delta t. Delta p we have already seen that it is 2 mvx, right? Then delta t will be is equal to, because one of the assumption was between two collisions the molecules are moving with a constant speed, right? So that's why we can say that vx will remain constant during this motion when this molecule collides with this surface, with this wall, and then goes and collides here as well and then comes back, right? So delta t will be is equal to, because it will have to travel a distance of 2a, right? A for going and a for coming back, and vx is the velocity speed in the x direction, so the time delta t will be is equal to 2a by vx. So we can say f will be is equal to mvx square by a. And from here, because you might be having a question that why didn't we consider the change of momentum here? Because actually we are trying to derive the pressure on this wall only. So that is why we are taking only the collisions which are happening with this wall into consideration. And that's now we can define the pressure on this wall because of this collision. Because of one molecule, of course, it will be equal to mv x square, and the area of this wall is also a square, right? So if we say, if we divide this by a square, it will become mvx square by a cube, and a cube is equal to a cube is equal to the volume of the container, right? So now because of the n molecules, we can say that pressure will be equal to simply m n vx bar square by volume. I hope so far it is clear. If you have any questions, you can write in the chat box. We will have some time for the discussion afterwards also, but if right now if you have any question, you can type in the chat box. So this is the pressure because of the pressure exerted by n molecules on this on one of the walls of the container, which is m vx square by v. Now, because the molecules are in tandem motion, right? So that means the average velocity in x, y, and z direction will be equal to this bar is the average, the symbol for the average, right? So mean square velocity in all the directions will be equal, right? Vx bar square, Vx square bar will be equal to Vy square bar is equal to Vz square bar. And from here we can say that mean velocity, total mean velocity, which will include the mean velocity in all the direction, will be equal to v square bar will be equal to vx square bar, vy square bar, and vz square bar, which is equal to 3 vx square bar, right? Because they are all equal. So now from here actually we can say that vx square bar is equal to v square by 3, v square bar by 3, and that's what we have replaced here. Earlier we were getting this expression and mn vx square by vx square by v, and now we have replaced vx square by v square bar. So basically average mean square velocity in x direction can be related to the mean square velocity, total mean square velocity of the molecules. So now we can say pressure is equal to n v square by v square bar divided by 3v, and that can also be represented like this, half 1 by 3 rho v square bar. Here v is the mean square velocity. You must notice actually that there is a difference between mean square velocity, which is equal to, which is actually the v square bar with the, basically it is the average of square velocities. But if you write this v bar square, that will be a different quantity. I hope you can visualize, you can see that difference, right? V square bar is different than v bar square. Now if we compare this, what we have got, pv is equal to, we can write this first part of the equation like this also, right? pv is equal to 2 by 3n, we have to just simply multiply and divide by 2, and then we can write 2 by 3n into half nv square bar, right? We can write this expression like this. And if we compare this with the ideal gas law, which is pv is equal to n by na, and n by na we are doing because here we are considering the molecules and we need to convert them into moles, right? So that's why it will become n by na into rt. If we compare these two, this half mv square bar is actually the kinetic energy, and that will come out to be is equal to 3 by 2 kt, right? If we compare these two expressions, and this we have seen earlier also, right? The kinetic energy of a monatomic gas is 3 by 2 kt, 3 by 2 kt. K is the Boltzmann constant, r is the ideal gas constant. If we divide that by Avogadro's number, which is Na, that becomes Boltzmann constant, right? So that will become 3 by 2 kT. Kinetic energy, which basically what we have derived using in this model, is actually that kinetic energy of a monatomic gas is 3 by 2 kT. The mean square, and it comes out, the major outcome of this discussion so far is actually that mean square velocity is proportional to the absolute temperature. If you increase the temperature, the kinetic energy of a gas also increase linearly with the temperature, right? And once we know the kinetic energy, right, because we assume that there are no intermolecular forces, that means there is no potential energy in the gas, because potential energy will be there only if there is interaction between the molecules, right? Since potential energy is zero, internal energy, which is the summation of kinetic energy and potential energy, will be is equal to only the kinetic energy itself. So from here we can write internal energy per mole for a monatomic gas is 3 by 2 Na times kT. This is for 1 mole. That's why we have multiplied 3 by 2 kT by Avogadro's number, because we are defining this for 1 mole of a gas, of a monoatomic gas. So now we can write the internal energy of 1 mole of a gas is 3 by 2 Na times kT. And from here we can define the molar heat capacity, right? Molar heat capacity, the definition of heat capacity itself is the change the the change in internal energy of a gas per unit temperature. Or if we want to write that in a differential form, we can write that du by dt, right? If you want to define molar heat capacity, that means the amount of, or the change in internal energy in 1 mole of a gas to increase its temperature by unit temperature. So that's why actually we have defined internal energy also for 1 mole. And then simply if we take this derivative of this, it will be simply 3 by 2 nak, or a very simple expression comes out, which is 3 by 2 r, right? So far is it clear? If you have any questions so far, you can unmute also yourself if there is anything which is not clear so far. Okay. So we have derived the expression for molar heat capacity at constant volume, and that comes out for a monatomic gas to be is equal to 3 by 2 r. Now, one thing actually, Maxwell's principle of equipartition of energy says that it assigns an average half kT energy per degree of freedom. Degree of freedom is like in how many ways we can change the energy of a system. For a monoatomic gas, we can change the energy of an atom only by changing its velocity in the three directions, right? So we can change its the x component of the velocity, y component of the velocity, and z component of the velocity. Somebody is asking, sir, why we take time as 2a by b? If this atom collide with any atom midway in its path, then time will change. That is correct. That's a good question. But here, if you remember, one of the assumption was that, let me go back to the slide, delta t collision is much less than delta t free motion, as well as the another assumption, which is v gas molecules is much less than v gas. That means there the concentration of molecules, or the number of molecules in the gas volume is much smaller. That means the probability of collision between the walls when it is moving and coming, basically going and coming back to the wall, it is very low. It comes from these two assumptions, that delta t collision is much less than delta t free motion, as well as volume occupied by the gas molecules is much smaller than the volume of the gas itself. Because of these two assumptions, we can safely assume that there will be no collision between the atoms while going and coming back to the wall. All right. So yes, Maxwell's principle of equipartition of energy assigns an average kT by 2 energy per degree of freedom. So in this monoatomic gas, we have actually 3 degrees of freedom, right? Because we can change the velocity in x, y, and z direction, and they are actually independent to each other. That's why there are 3 degrees of freedom, and what we get is 3 by 2 kT. The internal energy comes out to be 3 by 2 kT, right? So this principle comes very handy. Why is molar heat capacity at constant volume? It can be defined as at constant pressure also, but for our purpose, because we have kept the container volume constant, right? So that's why we are saying it as molar heat capacity at constant volume. It can be defined at constant pressure also, but in this case we have defined it actually for a constant volume. Okay. So this equipartition of energy rule comes in very handy sometimes. I will show with couple of examples in the next few slides. So let us see here. We have translation motion of, why is it not disappearing? Just give me a second. This bar is not disappearing. Yes, yes, yes. So we want to find out the average kinetic energy of this diatomic molecule. We have a diatomic molecules. So far we have discussed actually monoatomic molecules, which means in a molecule we have only one atom. Now we are discussing a case where actually we have two atoms in a single molecule which are connected through a bond, right? So think about it actually, how many degrees of first let us find out how many degrees of freedom are there in this diatomic molecule. If you find out the answer, you can type in the chat box how many degrees of freedom are there in this diatomic molecule. 6, 5, 5. Other people? 5, 5. Okay, so most of the people are answering 5. There are 5 degrees of freedom in this diatomic molecule. All right, yeah, I think most of the people are getting 3 translation to rotation. Somebody is explained also. So there are, yes, that is actually correct, that there are 5 degrees of freedom, right? This diatomic molecule can have velocities in the x, y, and z direction, or kinetic energy in the x, y, and z direction, as well as it can have a rotational motion also, right? But the rotational motion along the axis of this diatomic molecule will be zero, right? Because the moment of inertia will be zero, isn't it? So that's why the rotational degrees of freedom are only two. So we have three translational degrees of freedom and two rotational degrees of freedom. So that means we have total 5 degrees of freedom. So the total energy will of course become as 5 by 2 kT according to the Maxwell's principle of equipartition of energy. There will be kT by 2 energy for each degree of freedom. So there will be the total energy of this diatomic molecule will be 5 by 2 kT, right? Let us go to the next example. Now we have this, sorry. Now we have this solid where actually the atoms are connected through bonds, right? What in this picture what we have shown is the ball and spring model of a solid in which the springs represent the interatomic bonds. If we know that, we know actually that the atoms are bonded in a solid, right? There is a bond between the atoms. We have represented these bonds using these springs because bonds behave somewhat like a spring. So that's why we have represented them with the springs. Each ball is or atom is linked to its nearest neighbor by springs because it will have bonds with the nearest neighbors. So let us find out how many degrees of freedom will be there for this solid. Although the answer is sort of written on the slide, but still you can think about how many, you can think about how many degrees of freedom will be there, and you can write your answer in the chat box. The degrees of freedom for this solid. How many degrees of freedom are there for this solid? Okay. Okay, we are getting a lot of different answers. 3, 6, 12. Okay, other people. 3, 8, 6, 9, 6. Okay, I think a lot of people are answering 6, but there are other answers also 8, 9, 12, 3. So let us look at it. How we define the degrees of freedom of this system. So we have the atoms which are connected through bonds or through these springs in the solid, right? So of course the three degrees of freedom with respect to the kinetic energy, or basically the translational degrees of freedom. Is my voice clear now, or is it clear? Is it not clear to everyone, or there is some problem with already suction? Please, not clear. It is still not clear. Mm, Let me see. Is it better now? Hello. Okay. Yes. Actually, today my Wi-Fi broke down. There was some problem with the line, so I'm taking the class over mobile data. So that's why there might be sometimes the connection might be a little bit slow. Voice is again breaking. Let me check if I can connect different. Give me a second. Give me a second. I will. Hello. Can you hear me now? Is it better now? Yes. Okay. Okay. I'm connected to a different network, so hopefully it will work for some time. Okay. So yes, we were discussing this case, right? So what I was saying is, in this case, there will be 3 degrees of freedom, which will be with respect to the translational degrees of freedom, because all of the atoms will be moving around their equilibrium positions. So they will have translational degree of freedom or kinetic energy, as well as there will be a component of potential energy also, right? Because of the connection with these springs, right? They will be vibrating also around their equilibrium positions, and all these we can have 3 degrees of freedom with respect to the vibration also, right? Because the vibration can be in x, y, or z direction. So that is why we will have 3 degrees of freedom with respect to the kinetic energy, as well as 3 degrees of freedom for potential energy, or you can say vibrational motion of the atoms. Sorry, because of the vibrational potential energy, we will have additional 3 degrees of freedom, right? So that is why there will be total degrees of freedom will be 6. That means the energy of a solid becomes 3 kT, right? So if we have 3 kT energy for one atom or one molecule of a solid, sorry, one mole of a solid, total energy will become 3 RT, right? Total energy of a solid, of one mole of a solid, will be 3 RT, right? And from there we can again define the molar heat capacity, which is for a solid. Molar heat capacity for a solid will come out to be 3R, right? So that means kinetic molecular theory tells us that the molar heat capacity of any solid is actually constant, which is 25 joule per Kelvin per mole, right? This is also known as Dulong-Petit rule actually. This was probably one of the first models for deriving the thermal conductivity of, thermal conductivity of the, not thermal conductivity, sorry, heat capacity of the solids, molar heat capacity of the solids. Why not rotational degrees of freedom in this case? Rotation is not possible in this case, right? Again, there is some complaint about noise. Is it problematic for everyone? Is it is, is this a problem? Okay. Okay. Hello. Better now? Yes, Varun, I'm using a microphone. But that is not because of the microphone. I think this is because of the internet connection. So actually, bear with me for today. Okay, it is still breaking. Mm, it is still breaking. Let me check if we can. I will try to change the connection again and let's see if it works. Okay, now is the sound clear, or it is better at least? It won't be perfect today, but I hope it is better now. Is it better? No. Other people can you reply? Now how about now? How about now? Yes, okay, okay. Fine. All right. All right. Better. All right, good. All right. So yes, somebody asked that why there are no rotational degrees of freedom, right? Rotational because see the atoms are bonded to each other, right? So they cannot rotate around their equilibrium positions. What they can have, because there will be no the freedom for rotation is not there because the atoms are bonded to each other. If they were not bonded, then there will be an additional rotational degree of freedom also. If they are not bonded in all the directions, right? Like for example, in previous case, we had only diatomic molecules where actually only two atoms are bonded to each other. But in this case, atom is bonded in all the directions, so that's why it cannot rotate around its position. That's why there is no rotational degrees of freedom. Rotation means actually you will have to rotate the whole solid, which means the solid is not in equilibrium. That will mean that actually. So that's why there are no rotational degrees of freedom. There was one more question, that how can we generalize the result which we derived for gas to solid? Yes, that is a good question. And the thing is that we are utilizing this very simple model which was derived for the gases. As I said in the very beginning, some of the phenomenon in solids, for example, heat capacity of metals, and uh, uh, there was in semiconductors also we can explain some of the things using this kinetic molecular theory, like heat capacity of metals as well as average speed of electrons in semiconductors. That can be explained. People tried to apply it and then found out that this can be these phenomena can be explained using the kinetic molecular theory. Okay, so your question is perfectly valid, but we use it where it works, right? We use this model only where it works because of its simplicity. It's a very simple model, right? It only says that the kinetic energy per atom will be 1 by 2 kt, sorry, 3 by 2 kt, and per degree of freedom it will be 1 by 2 kt. So the results are very simple. So as far as we can apply this model, it's good, right? Because that makes our job easier. Okay, so why rotational motion is not possible along the face-centered axis passing through the face-centered? Yes, it is possible, but that means your solid is not in equilibrium, right? If the whole solid is moving, if the whole solid is rotating, then the solid is not in equilibrium, right? So for whatever we are discussing only in the equilibrium solid. How does potential energy contribute towards 3 degrees of freedom? Because there are springs, basically there are bonds in all the direction, in all the three dimensions, and because of that we will have potential energy in all the three dimensions which are independent to each other, and that is why we can have 3 degrees of freedom in for the potential energy itself also, in addition to the 3 degrees of freedom in the kinetic energy. Okay. All right. I hope the all the doubts are clear so far. So yes, we were here. We came to the Dulong-Petit rule, which says that molar heat capacity of any solid is constant. So the question, like why we are applying it to solid? Actually, we have defined or we have derived this molar heat capacity for all the solids, but it does not hold true for all the solids. That is the limitation of this model. Every model has its own assumptions, and from those assumptions come its limitations also. So we will discuss some of those limitations maybe in the later part of the of this topic. If it is any questions so far, because we are done with the kinetic molecular theory, we will use this theory now for deriving the electrical conductivity of metals, or not deriving actually, but introducing some of the concepts for electrical conductivity. If solid is not moving, why did we consider translational degrees of atom? See, whole solid is not moving, but atoms are vibrating or atoms are moving around their equilibrium positions always because of the temperature. At any finite temperature, there will be motion in the atoms at the atomic level. We are talking about that kinetic energy. Yes. So it is not that whole solid is moving, but the atoms are moving around their equilibrium positions. When do we say the atom is stable? Atom is, see, there is no definition for the stability of the atom. Stability is a macroscopic concept. Stability is a macroscopic concept. At microscopic level, we can't define stability actually. What is Dulong-Petit rule? Dulong-Petit rule is actually that it simply says, let us go one by one. When do we say the atom is stable? Is that question clear now? There is no concept of stability of an atom. Stability is a macroscopic concept. Okay. What is Dulong-Petit rule? Dulong-Petit rule is actually that simply states that molar heat capacity of any solid is 3R or 25 joule per mole Kelvin. That is Dulong-Petit rule. Okay. In what way we are seeing equilibrium in rotational motion? That question is not clear. You can unmute yourself to please clarify your question. In what way we are seeing equilibrium in rotational motion? We are saying the macroscopic solid is in equilibrium or is stable. It's not only with respect to the rotational motion. It is basically the total external force on the solid is zero. That means the solid is at equilibrium. That's what we are saying. Sir, the degree of freedom of CO2 is 5. What is CO2? CO2, you are talking about carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide is not a diatomic molecule. But the vibrational degree of freedom is not taken into account. Why? Because see, these atoms vibrational degree of freedom will come into picture only if there are bonds in all the directions, right? So here in this case, this is a diatomic molecule, and it is having only 3 degrees of freedom in the kinetic energy and 2 degrees of freedom in the rotational kinetic energy. That's what we are saying. We said that
Yes, sir, but there should be vibrational energy along the bonds as well, right? Because that's what we are considering in the previous case.
right. So for the gaseous case, because here we are talking about,
It's a linear molecule.
sorry.
So, so CO2 is a linear molecule with carbon in between and oxygen on the sides with double bonds.
uh,
So we consider the rotational degrees of freedom that are 2 and 3 translational, but there should be vibrational as well.
Vibration, see, actually, what we are see what we say usually, the vibration kinetic energy that exists only in the solids. The reason for that is these the bonds which are there in the solids, they allow for the vibration along, I mean, basically they are not strong enough, so that's why they allow for the vibration about their equilibrium position. But in a gas, for example, CO or CO2, these are very solid covalent bonds. These are intramolecular bonds, right? These intramolecular bonds are very, very strong. So there is no vibration in a gas molecule. But in a solid, there are enough experimental evidences that there is vibration, that the atoms actually vibrate around their equilibrium positions because of these bonds. But in the gaseous case, we never observe this kind of vibrational motion. So your point is correct actually. If we take the same analogy from the solid to the gaseous molecule, we will have one additional degree of freedom along the because of the vibration in this direction, in the direction of the bond. But in case of gases, actually we don't observe this vibrational motion. That's why we have not considered that particular degree of freedom. Hello.
Okay, sir.
Yes.
Yes, sir. And
Hmm.
also, there's one more doubt.
Mm-hmm.
In case of gaseous molecules, we consider we like it's calculated, like the rotational degrees of freedom are calculated by the symmetry. So like it's if the molecule is symmetrical about x-axis, so its rotation won't be considered along x-axis. So we take rotational degrees of freedom. But in case of solids, since they cannot rotate, so that's why we consider
See,
uh, vibrational degrees of freedom.
solids cannot rotate. A single molecule can rotate around its position in a gas, but in solid, one atom cannot rotate around its position, right? Because it is bonded from all the sides, isn't it? Right?
Oh, okay, sir. So we look for molecules in gaseous state and we look for atoms in solid state while
Yes.
considering the degrees of freedom.
Yes, yes. Because see, in a gas, actually, the unbreakable unit is a molecule, right?
A molecule.
It is very, very
Yes,
difficult to
sir. Yes,
break
sir.
CO2 into carbon and oxygen. You can do that, but it requires a lot of energy, isn't it? But in case of solids, we can break them. Like we can take out one atom from the solid. So that is why we consider the unbreakable unit. In this case, the unbreakable unit is molecule in case of a gas, and in this case, the atoms are the basic unit which form the whole solid. Okay.
Okay, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes. There was any other question? Any question which I have missed? Sir, translation, you said atom vibrating about its equilibrium position. So, what is vibration or vibrational or potential degree of freedom? See, translation is basically the kinetic energy which is there in the atom because of these vibrations. But because of these vibrations, the energy of these springs, right? There will be some potential energy stored in these springs. We are considering right now, we are basically giving an analogy for bonds with a spring, right? So there will be some potential energy also in these springs, and that provides additional degree of freedom. Like for example, in a spring also we have both kinetic energy as well as potential energy, right? You can imagine in a similar way that we have both the kinetic energy as well as potential energy in this case also. Sir, in diatomic molecule case, why not potentially? I think I just explained that. See, in case of diatomic molecule, the atoms are not actually vibrating around their equilibrium position, so there is no vibrational potential or the spring potential which is stored, or there is no potential energy which is stored in this spring, right? Because these bonds are very strong, so these atoms are not actually vibrating because of this bond. We cannot we cannot give similar analogy of a spring in this case. Another way to put it. Any other question? I think because now it is already about 9:50, I will not start a new topic. So if you have any other question, we can take them up.
Hi Abhishek, am I audible?
Yes, yes,
If there is time, I wanted to add something on this Dulong pipette rule, which student was asking.
yes.
So maybe there may be some interesting uh, facts about this rule, which may be checked on Wikipedia or somewhere. The idea is like, as it is mentioned, the heat capacity, as we know, is related to the quantity, the amount of element. Here, what is done is, it turns out that you know that the atomic weight is related to mole. So when we are doing the experimental results division for per mole, it turns out to be a constant value. So this was actually an empirical observation, which the scientists notice that when they are dividing it by atomic weight or per atomic weight or per mole, then they are observing that it is coming as a constant value. I am done.
Okay, thank you, Varun. Any other questions?
Sir,
Yes,
hello, sir, am I audible?
yes, yes, you are audible.
Sir, when we talk about degree of freedom, na, it's all about the variables. The variables
Mhm.
which can change the energy are known as degree of freedom.
Right.
So when you say there are three translational degree of freedom, so actually what are you talking about? There can be you always say that there are three translational degree of freedom means kinetic energy is changing in three direction x y z,
Mhm.
or is it about temperature because every component has one by half kt, so
Mhm.
there will be a temperature also can be act as a variable. So what you are talking about means kinetic energy as velocity or as temperature as a variable?
Okay, that's a good question actually. So we are see temperature cannot be talked in three different dimensions, right? So we are here we are actually talking about kinetic energy in terms of velocity because we can change, and your point is correct. Basically, degree of freedom is how many variables we have, right? So here in case of, for example, when we are saying we have three translational degrees of freedom, that means we can change the Vx, Vin, Vy and Vz independent of each other, right? So that's why we have three variables which translate into three degrees of freedom. So we are looking at kinetic energy in terms of the velocity, not in temperature. As far as temperature is concerned, we have already said that, right? Maxwell's equipartition of energy rule says that in we have say equal energy for each degree of freedom, right? Is that, does that answer your question?
Halfly, sir, means if
Mhm.
someone asks that how in x direction degree of freedom is changing, then
By
according as you
changing
are
the
talking,
velocity, by
by
changing
changing velocity,
velocity in the x direction, yes.
then someone can also argue that if we change the temperature also, so there might be one extra variable, then what can we say?
See, I mean, temperature is not independent of the velocity, right? We can change the temperature is actually changed can be changed only by changing these the velocity or the potential energy of the solid or any system, right? So it is not, temperature comes from the atomic vibrations or atomic motions of the molecules or of the solid, but it is not independent. Like you cannot change the temperature at the atomic level or at the microscopic level. Only what you can change is, or what can be changed by different mechanisms is the velocities or the microscopic parameters of a solid, and according to that the temperature of the solid also changes, right? If you change the temperature from outside, let us say if you change the temperature, then you will be changing the you will not have control over x, y and z components of the velocity, that those will be defined by the very structure of the solid itself. So that cannot act as a additional degree of freedom, right? At the
Okay,
microscopic
sir.
level, because temperature, what you are saying, what you are trying to compare is microscopic quantities with macroscopic quantity. Temperature is microscopic, right? And because we cannot change temperature of one atom itself, but we can change, or we can control the velocity of atoms in that sense.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir. Got it, sir.
Yes.
So in gases, when you say that you don't have a potential degree of freedom, so it's
Mhm.
just because in gases atoms are so apart, so distant apart that
Mhm.
they cannot apply force on each other, and that's why there is no potential.
Mhm. Yes, yes, exactly. Like
Uh,
there is no interatomic potential. Intraatomic, intraatomic, as I said, the bonds are so strong that they cannot vibrate along each other, but they are joined to each other. We basically consider one molecule. Let us say if it is diatomic molecule, we consider it as one unit itself.
so, but why are you saying that in gases molecules are like strongly bonded?
Because see, I mean, you can check that, check that yourself also, because in gas, for example, we just took the example of carbon dioxide, right? It is very difficult to break a gaseous molecule, and the atoms in a molecule, for example in a carbon dioxide molecule, they don't vibrate along around its equilibrium position, but in solids they do. And that is also because of the large periodicity in the solid crystals also. In gases we don't have this periodicity, right? These are only single atoms or molecules which are far apart from each other. Like if we have a diatomic molecule gas, then the molecules are separated by a large distance from each other. But in case of solid we have large periodicity, because of that all the atoms are bonded to each other.
Okay, sir.
Okay.
Sir, sir, in solids,
Hmm.
uh, we considered the vibrational degree of freedom because the atoms can vibrate about the position. But why did we consider the translational degree of freedom?
uh, okay, let me go back. So here we are saying that these atoms are bonded with the spring, right? There will be, because of the vibrations of these atoms, of course the atoms will be vibrating, that means there will be kinetic energy in the atoms, right? There will be some kinetic energy associated with each atom, because they will be vibrating with certain velocity. But because of that vibration there will be some potential energy in these springs also, right? All the springs which are connected to this particular atom, they will be having potential energy also, right? So because of this potential energy we have three additional degrees of freedom. Kinetic energy is coming because of the vibrational velocity of the atoms, and the three degrees of freedom are coming because of the potential energy which is stored in these springs or in the bonds which are connecting these two atoms, right?
Okay, sir.
Yes. Any other question? Any doubts? Okay. I think if there are no doubts, we will stop here for today, and then we will continue this topic from Tuesday's class. Monday's class will be taken again by Varun, and he will be revising or clearing some doubts regarding phase diagrams and Gibbs phase rule. And after that, on from Tuesday's class, we will again continue with this topic. Okay. If you still have further doubts about this, we can always discuss in the tutorial classes. Thank you very much.